We are back again with another episode of Men the Mind. I believe we are on number 16 now, so still flying through. Today, we got a very special guest, our guy Brock, who is fresh out of his first adult league baseball game. His return after 2 years removed from the sport. Wow. Brock, I'll give you a chance to kind of introduce yourself a little bit, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. First of all, I appreciate you all having me on today. I'm Brock. I am in my second year of sports psychology master's program at Florida State. I've had the great honor to meet Nick down here in Tallahassee, Florida. It's been an amazing experience for me to grow as a person, as a professional. I played collegiate baseball at a small D3 up in Pittsburgh region. So just applying my firsthand athletic experience to my work with athletes right now as a mental performance coach has been a very valuable experience. And I just love everything about, the brain and specifically how we can apply intensity to, our everyday lives and our practice in order to get better. Appreciate
it. Love. Now, the topic, as you kind of foreshadowed there, that was awesome, is intensity. That we were kind of jumping in with today. I want to start by actually throwing it to Mike. First thoughts when you heard the topic of intensity. I'll go back to Brock.
Yeah, so my initial thought when we said intensity, I was like, how are we going to spin this? How are we going to make this a robust topic? How are we going to fill in really like the normal time frame that we fill in for intensity? Because my thought around intensity is an action. It is something that you do versus in my head. I don't know if you can learn intensity, but then Nick, when we had a chance to rap for a minute, we talked about your thought on how we want to drive the conversation on how the point I just kind of made about how intensity actually is taught, or how you develop intensity, or where you find that motivation to be intense, if you want to say it that way. I was like, okay, I think I see where this is going. I like the thought process here. So I think we're going to have a really, really special episode on our hands with this one.
I agree. And without further ado, Brock, what comes to your mind with intensity? Because this is something that you seem passionate about.
Yes, absolutely. So, I wanted to get on the pod, and I thought, what do I want to bring? And, there's a lot of great ways to talk about, the basic pillars of mental skills training, about, teaching good mental resilience to athletes. But to me, I saw a quote when I was reading a book, Mental ABCs of Pitching. And it said that only intense actions develop and strengthen good habits. And that just stuck with me. Only intense actions develop and strengthen good habits. So I was like, you know what? How can we apply intensity to all these different aspects of our life? What does intensity look like? How does it tie in with motivation? How much of it is taught? How much of it is innate within ourselves? And how do we apply it? It's such a, very subjective topic, but I think that it's a great way to build on those good habits, like it mentions in the mental ABCs of pitching.
Hey, Brock,
so
run that back one more time for me. Nick and I would like to capture a couple quotes when they come across, and I think that was a good one. You said only. Go ahead and run it back one more time.
All right. Only intense actions develop and strengthen good habits.
Only intense actions develop and strengthen good habits. Correct.
Yep.
Is that something that you have personal experience with?
Absolutely. I think I always consider myself a grinder. I wasn't the most talented guy. Part of being successful is made up of having innate ability. I never felt like I had the superstar ability to put me above the next guy. So growing up, playing in very competitive sport arenas, it was, I got to bring in more than the next guy. I might not be as good as him, but I'm going to outcompete him. And that's what intensity is when we step into the arena, we're both warriors. Who's going to bring it more? And you got to kind of bring that edge, when it comes down to it, because ability can only get you so far.
Yeah, facts. Real quick to that point of ability can get you will only get you so far. I'm pretty sure we probably all heard this before, but hard work beats talent when talent fails to work hard. Like when you said that, that's immediately what I thought of, and that's kind of what I thought about this quote as well. Only intense actions develop and strengthen good habits. That's in my mind. That's the same premise of building intensity and getting to that. I guess that state of mind or natural state of being that you will ultimately want to move towards. So I like that a lot. I like that a lot.
For sure. And just bringing it in every aspect of your lifestyle. I think when Nick asks me, like, how do you personally apply this? And for me growing up, it was always sport. I would bring intensity with sport, but in other aspects of my life, I would just kind of go through the motions a little bit. And with elite athletes, they put all their intensity into their sport. How can we maybe bring a little bit of intensity to other aspects of our life to be more well-rounded? Like, that's what I kind of thought about with myself. And one thing that I found recently that I put a lot more effort and intensity into is my nutrition. So I was like, how can I, really bring it in the kitchen when I'm cooking to really, take control over what I'm putting in my body? If I want to develop and strengthen a good habit of nutrition, I have to be deliberate about it. I have to be intense in my actions about, being strict in my scheduling. When am I going to the store? When am I cooking meals? How many meals do I need this week? And we're bringing that effort, that preparation, all those different subcategories of intensity we're just going to allow me to build that habit more strongly than if I were to just casually walk through it and say, oh, I'll just cook. Yeah, I'll cook once this week and figure it out from there.
Yeah. And I like that example too with the nutrition. My grandmother, who didn't overlap with a lot, to be honest, but I get a lot of quotes from my mom, from her mom. But one of her favorite quotes was, if you're going to do it right. And it's a joke in our family because even if you mess something up, it's like, well, do your best at messing it up, right? But I think in a serious note, bringing the intensity and making the most out of whatever situation you're in is such a valuable thing to have. Even if it's a job that you don't like, if you're going to be in the room, bring it to the room. Otherwise, why be in the room, right? And so I may not like, and quite frankly, for a long time, this is a embarrassing fact, but Mike used to try to teach me how to cook, or at least the idea was presented, and our friend Gene, because when it came to doing anything, including seasoning ground beef, the extent that I went to was salt and pepper, and that was, and so like I'm doing this regardless. Like I'm gonna have to make, not buying it all the time. I didn't have that budget. And I was not bringing it to the stove at all. And was there a benefit, to switch it? And I would say yes, since I've started using other spices and flavors. What is it? An extra 2-3 seconds to the meal, and it's so much of it. So much better when I do that. When I do add those extra spices.
Not. Go ahead, bro.
And that just. Sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, like, that just ties into something that I think about where you said, like, it takes maybe 5 seconds to add a couple more spices. A lot of the time that we think about using mental, expenditure of mental energy, it's a lot more overwhelming when we think about it than when we actually do it. So thinking, learning seasoning, learning this different style of cooking, it's overwhelming when you think about it, when it goes on up in your head. But when you actually go out and execute the task, it didn't take as much mental energy as you really thought it was going to take. So sometimes just like throwing yourself into it and just saying, I don't really care about what happens, but I'm going to just hop into it, give the mental energy instead of wasting the mental energy wondering what the outcomes could be, what the circumstances are.
Very, very valid point. Very, very valid point. I think it probably ties back to one of our previous episodes. Again, Nick, I think we might have to bring Caleb back again, man, because we keep going back to his process versus outcome. You kind of fall in love with the process, and the outcome will take care of itself. Adding a couple more seconds or a couple more minutes of work in the process, actually doing the work, and the outcome usually yields better results. So I think that's just another point that ties into. I want to ask us as a whole here, though, what is one of the earliest memories we have of learning intensity or learning what it is to be intense? Whether it was you saw somebody hustling with sports, you were competing against one of your friends in the classroom. I know my best friend and I from kindergarten, we would compete just to see who would get the highest test grades. Like we wanted the best grades in the class, whatever it is. But what were some of those moments that y'all have where y'all first encountered intensity?
That is a great question, and two came to mind. I don't know which one would have been first, but similar to you saying, test scores and trying to be the best at the test, we used to play this game around the world with multiplication fun facts. You're in a circle with your class, and if I am the person who answers 5 times 7 right first, then I stand up and I go to the next person, and you just go around the world and see how far you can get, right? My best friend could do a full lap. There was nobody that was getting him. He brought his A game, and except for maybe, I could get him 30% of the time. And so I was dialed in trying to beat him in multiplication fun facts. And so that's one. And then another was at elementary school. We had a floor hockey league. I don't know if anybody's familiar. But just throw a puck onto the gym floor, give all of the kindergarten through I think 5th graders a hockey stick, put somebody in net, and see who wins. And we had a school-wide organized floor hockey league. And so we would play that a few days a week. And that was another one where, I vividly remember chasing the puck down on breakaways and trying to score, or like trying to chase somebody out on defense, being way too locked in. I think that was probably my first organized.
Okay. All right. Real quick, Nick, what's 5 times 7? All right.
35.
All right. Solid. You're valid. Okay. You learned them math facts, man. What about you, Brock?
The first thing that popped into my mind was being a freshman in high school in the new high school baseball program. And we had team lifts that were, a very overwhelming environment for someone new to the program with all the upperclassmen. So it was 9th through 12th grade, all in the gym at the same time. So, you see some of these big guys, they got the beards, they're built. And, I'm just this 15-year-old, I got the baby face. I'm super skinny, super tall. And I'm just like, wow, like these guys bring it. How do I get to that point? I want to be able to get to that position where I can be, a little bit more built, make myself more competitive on and off the field. And the specific activity that really clicked for me was when we were doing sled pushes. So I think it's called an Iditarod, where you tie a rope to the sled, you push it down, and then pull it back with the rope. At least that's what our coach called it. So the push down and then that pull back with the rope on it with a couple plates on there. And you do that a couple times, 3-4 times, and you'll know what intensity is pretty quickly. I didn't at the time, but when I saw specific like upperclassmen just busting it to the end, the end of the rope, just pulling it in, and I was like, that's what it looks like. Not even taking those last couple pulls of the rope off, like finishing it down to the end, and I was like, wow, that's how you bring it in the gym, and it just that absolutely stuck.
That's good. That's really good. How has that experience with intensity, Brock, for you in particular, how has that shifted your mindset as a freshman? Because I think we all can remember back to our freshman year. We were probably very impressionable, and it was easy to spot the leaders. It's very easy to tell who the leaders on the team are within an organization, amongst friend groups, whatever the case may be. How did that workout, one of the first workouts of the baseball team as a freshman, how did that affect your mindset going forward, being a part of the program and what you wanted to contribute to the team?
To me, the first word that pops into my mind is fulfillment. So when I gave every single thing I had into a lift, into a throwing session, whatever it was, to try to contribute to the team, I was so much more fulfilled. I walked away knowing that I didn't leave anything I had in the weight room, when you walk away and you're like, I felt like took a couple sets off, even a couple reps off, that'll wear on you. If you hold yourself accountable, that'll catch up to you pretty quickly. People that are a little bit more hands off with themselves, a little bit more carefree, that might not affect them. But people that are, very effort driven, you take a couple sets off, you're going to not feel as fulfilled. But giving that, utter just how bad do I want it right now mentality, that how bad do you want it, and just busting it the entire time. I was like, if I keep doing this as a freshman, if I learn how to do this now, there's no reason why, next year that I won't have built some good habits and good work ethic to contribute in one way or another, even if it's just with my work ethic.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nick.
I just loved how it was phrased and the wording that you used in particular, like the effort-driven piece. And I think it ties in beautifully with something you opened with, this idea that, even if the ability isn't there, I'm not letting the person to my left or right outwork me. And when you talk about that experience, it's directly and intentionally focused on what is in your control. And I think that is one of the most powerful things that you can do when you're building those habits. This really does tie back in with Caleb, which is funny because I've told plenty of Caleb stories, and I think they would very much enjoy being in the same thing together. When Caleb talked about self-discipline, something that came up a few times was intentionality.
Right.
And I think intentionality and intensity can go hand in hand in a really, really nice way. And my head even went to the idea of intensity can be past, present, and future focused. Whereas, intensity and intentionality both can. Whereas when we were talking with Caleb, like there was a lot of self-discipline and staying in the moment. Again, I think there's times for each, but I think that there's a real value to being intense when you're planning something. If you're in line with goals that you have that are a few years down the road, you can be intense in setting that up and then lock in the moment on your journey to those goals, which is a really cool concept that popped in my head talking about it, especially progressing through from a freshman on a baseball team.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you said that dream aspect. That's something that I had written down in my notes before the session about following dreams and how people don't really give their dreams a full chance in life. There's always that one little hurdle that a lot of people don't really want to try to cross because it puts them in a potentially really uncomfortable position. I read this in, I forget which book, but it basically, the title of this chapter was called Mediocrity. And it was just discussing how, what does mediocrity look like for a lot of people? And it's just not giving our dreams a chance. It's not taking that extra step because it's too much. It's too intense. I don't know how to handle it. I've never given that much effort before. I'm not that driven. I'm scared. And living in that awkward mediocrity, I think, is a really good, maybe potential opposite of intensity is mediocrity. Could be something that we could tie in for sure.
So real quick, I actually want to speak to that piece about mediocrity, following your dreams. And Brock, this is news to you, but I think as a collective here, I've told everybody else, I'm pretty sure, but I put in my 2-week notice now 2 weeks ago. This past Friday was my last day for my corporate job, my job in corporate America. And I had many conversations with my sales manager, general manager, a couple directors, all phenomenal people. The common question that I got asked, which understandably, is, so what's next? What are you going to do next? What is your plan? Where are you headed? What path are you going to go? And my answer to that was, I'm following my passion. I'm following my dream right now. The next step that I'm taking, the road that I'm going down next is purely for passion, purely because I feel like this is where God has called me to do work, and it excites me. It really gets me up in the morning and gets me going. So we talk about being mediocre, or what mediocrity is to some people, or in the book, for that example, not following your dreams or not following that passion.
Mhm.
I've had that experience really the past 3 years of that I've been working, or with the company that I've been with, because many of the days that I would get up and go to work, I knew this isn't where my heart is. This isn't where my head is. This is where my body is right now. This is a means to an end. I have to be present in this moment, but I know where it is I want to be, and I felt like I was selling myself short. Like you said, when you leave the weight room, or when you're leaving a workout or classroom, insert your own example here. Did you leave it all out there? Do you feel like you shortchanged yourself? Do you feel like you could have put in a bit more effort to get to where you actually wanted to go? And that's how I was feeling. So I think your example is extremely valid and extremely spot on with that piece of, that is what mediocrity can look like, is selling yourself short. It's really not, it doesn't have much to do with anybody else. And that's not saying to cheat people, to undercut people. But if you are doing things in good faith, with good morals, and acting or moving authentically, as long as you don't shortchange yourself, I think that's where you'll find that the intensity, the passion, the self-discipline, all those things will start tying together. So when you talk about mediocrity being selling yourself short or not giving all that you have, man, I completely agree with that. Completely agree with it.
That's great insight. I appreciate you sharing that, that personal testimony, because it ties in so well to all these different concepts that we're trying to piece together. And it reminds me of a statement that my friend Mark says. We're very good friends through baseball growing up, and just Mark is one of those guys that just inspires me to be a more intense, more just passionate person in general. And he just says, our go-to quote is, "The train just keeps chugging."
Yep.
And it's such a simple quote. It's so metaphorical and deep. Regardless of what happens, whoever wants to be on our train, whoever wants to ride along, doesn't matter. We're going to keep chugging. We're going to keep following whatever path we want to follow. It's going to slow down. It might go down a little bit of a different path. It might get ugly, but it's going to keep moving. And bringing that, 10 out of 10 effort to wherever you feel like you're at that day. Are you a 4 out of 10 today? Give me a 10 out of 10 out of your 4 out of 10. That's the best, takeaway message with intensity. Okay, so you're sick. You have a lot of homework. Your roommates are annoying you. I don't care. You feel like a 3 out of 10 today. Well, find a way to give me a 10 out of 10 out of that 3 that you have. How can you still bring it due to the circumstances that you're in? So with you personally, like, you felt a little bit drained in that corporate work setting. It's okay to acknowledge that, but you still had that internal drive to bring it. It might have not been the best situation for you, but you still brought it. And then you said, all right, I want to find a way to take this intensity and apply it 100%. To a different aspect of my life. And that's a big step.
100%. 100%.
So I'm going to join the quotes train here, I think. Hoping these hit for you guys, but love that. And I think two that tie in really well with that from my personal favorite quotes list I try to keep on the side. When you are focused on your roommates being annoying, you're not feeling the best. You're at this 3 out of 10. Your focus is usually on those things they're taking away from the experience. The same way, and I think this is very big when we're talking about starting a new job, or even Nat was bugging us. Somebody, or I want to produce podcasts. But there was mention of a podcast years before we started doing anything like this. And a lot of times when we don't want to initiate that change, something that came up when we were talking with Eric and Brandon a few episodes ago too. I rewatched Good Will Hunting, and there's a quote in there that you're always afraid to take the first step because you're so focused on all the negatives 10 miles down the road. And that went straight through me. I was like, That is so true, dude. That's why I won't even do my laundry. Something that's as simple as that. I don't hold it, so I won't put it in there. I love
Grow
all of
up.
it.
Grow up.
And it's when you've got that things. Yeah, for real. You got these mountain of objectives that you need to tackle. And the easiest way to get through the mountain is to start with the first piece of the mountain. You're looking at the whole mountain. It's a bunch of things put together. So take those apart and lock it on. And when you can focus on the fact that you're not going to do it all at once, focus on what you can control, we get to a quote that's been in my head a little bit with what Brock is saying, tying back to this idea of those habits, that work ethic, and keep chugging along and give me that 10 out of 10, even if it's 3 out of 10 for the day. Work ethic eliminates fear. This is
That's
a quote
good.
that gets tossed around
That's
from my
good.
understanding in the so you'll like this. The three guys that I know use this quote is JJ Redick, Jamal Crawford, and Kobe. And so that was something that they really like to throw around. Work ethic eliminates.
I'm gonna put that on the shirt. That is real good.
And it ties back to what Brock was saying about, I gave my all. I've got nothing to be ashamed of. I put it all out there. And if it wasn't enough, it simply wasn't enough. And that's okay. But walking away from whatever it is that you're doing without leaving it all out there, that's what's going to keep you up at night,
Yeah, I mean, that the fear is, worrying about what happened in the past and the unpredictability of the future. Eliminating fear is present awareness of what I can do in this moment. Work ethic is applying that present moment focus to something to directly benefit you in whatever aspect of your lifestyle that you're talking about. Another, now that we're on the quotes train, another one pops into my head here. And I think quotes are just a really great way to really tie in, knowledge and like real world application. So how you do anything is how you do everything. If you bring it in the classroom, but you don't bring it on the field, we got to start questioning your work ethic. If you bring it on the field, bring it in the classroom, but your laundry's stacked up in your room, Nick.
Yep.
How well are you willing to apply that work ethic to every domain of your life? How well are you willing to be intense about every single thing that you do? Understanding that, oh yeah, this guy busts it on the field. He's a grinder. You can tell that he loves ball. He loves getting after it at practice and games. And off the field, he's got D's in the classroom. We got to start wondering how can we apply that drive to other aspects of your life? And I think the most intense and driven people do it with everything. And when you think intensity, I think David Goggins.
Facts.
And he's like he's the peak of intensity. He's the king of intensity. He is Mr. Bring It On. And he said, to be intense is to do something really hard when you wake up. He says, make your bed right when you get up because no one wants to do it. Start your day off with something that you hate to do. Make your bed, fold your clothes, whatever it is. You start your day off with that little bit of effort-driven behavior, that little bit of intensity. Everything else you do in the day is going to rub off with that and be able to apply it. And it might even be easier, the things you do the rest of the day, if you just get that one hard thing out of the way right away.
Yeah. So this is going to take a little bit of a turn, but I'm excited for it. For me in Goggins, and I'll be fully transparent in that I'm familiar, but not in depth with Goggins. But a conversation that came up at work a few weeks ago was the idea of kind of what you have alluded to, at least how I'm interpreting it, of this is who I am and this is what I do. So if I am an intense person and I bring it to everything that I do, that is who I am, that's what I do. So regardless of the task, that is me. And so I identify as that, I will do that. How does that fit in for you with the idea of fun, enjoyment, and curiosity? And how much overlap is there? And how much does one override the other? Should you do things because they're fun? Should everything be fun? Or is that two butterflies and rainbows?
That's tough. Because the more intense you are about things, sometimes that takes the enjoyment out of it. So how do we balance being very passionate and driven and intense, almost addicted to the grind, while still finding enjoyment in it?
Yeah.
That's challenging. One thing that pops into my head is task versus ego orientation. So being task oriented, having things, setting objectives in your direct control and regularly evaluating them. I think some enjoyment can be found in that process, because then you're able to achieve things within your direct control. That's where the enjoyment comes from, is that, the winning the little things, winning the day, that carpe diem mentality of like, I'm having fun because I know I went all out today. You almost find that little bit of enjoyment through grinding so much. That enjoyment coming from winning those small tasks throughout the day, getting that 1% every day. And then after a month, you're like, this is fun. Like I really know how to push myself. I really know like what I'm capable of now. And it becomes almost a game within yourself of like, I'm having a fun time seeing how hard I can push myself. The enjoyment, it can vary, because people that are ego oriented, they're playing the game not to lose. They're worried about teammates, coaches, friends. They're worried about, their ego. They're worried about protecting it, playing the game not to lose. And, what can I do to be safe in my bubble? They don't have too much fun playing. They're worried about outcomes. They're worried about what my coach thinks about me. They tend to have a lot less fun playing the game. But task-oriented individuals that are, I think, effort-driven, they bring it in terms of winning those small battles. And that's where the real enjoyment, I think, comes from.
So I'm a double down on that a little bit, because I do agree that the enjoyment does come from accomplishing the task, being locked in, completing goals or accomplishing goals. I believe all that holds true. And I've actually read one of David Goggins' books. Tyler, our old Fleet Feet owner, he gave me one of his books. He let me borrow one of his books to read. And so I read it all the way through, and I probably read it in maybe a week. It was probably less than that, because I was so locked in to what it is that David Goggins had wrote. And everything from start to finish was intense. I mean, the opening lines to the last sentence of the book, you have this overwhelming feeling of, I can accomplish anything that I want to. Now, same coin, different side. I do believe that there are times, and this will probably be very controversial to what Mr. Goggins believes, and we'll have him on here one day for him to talk about it, and he can kind of give us his 2 cents. But he'd probably disagree. I think there are some areas in your life where it's not as important to be that intense. If you're going to your 7-year-old nephew or niece's soccer game, and this is their first season playing, nobody's asking you to show up and to be that honor uncle who is going all out, screaming at the ref, just because you were once a collegiate athlete, you even maybe professional, or you competed at a very high level in high school, you were a varsity starter, whatever the case may be. Remember, these are 7-year-old kids who are just learning fundamentals of the game. They're just getting started, and they probably don't need that same intensity that you have or that you apply to your life all the time. Now, the structure could be good for them, but the intensity, we could probably dial it back. We could probably dial it back a little bit. Relationship wise, my thought is that you probably don't need to be super intense relationship wise all the time. There's your IQ and there's your EQ, your emotional quotient. And if that is not high, if that's always, if you are always operating in that same intense level, you come home, you want everything to be perfect. You nitpick, talk about everything that's wrong. again, I doubt that's one of those times that intensity is going to be the most beneficial thing for you. When we talk about how you do one thing is how you do everything. I think there's a very, very small asterisk by that because, again, not everything in life needs to be done at that super, super intense level. Like we got to pick and choose some of those battles that we want to fight along the way.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. There is a very much a little asterisk there that Goggins and these, big dogs in the field are going to say, no, it's got to be everything in your lifestyle. That's, it's okay to preach that, but like you said,
Right.
we got to be human sometimes. We can't bring it everywhere. And knowing when to check in and out of that intensity mindset of, okay, I can take it easy today. I'm hanging out with the family. I'm going to watch my niece's soccer game. I'm just hanging out with, my significant other or whatnot. Like, I don't need to bring this full on intensity mindset right now. Knowing when to check out of it and knowing when to dial it back in could be challenging for some individuals that are just an all or nothing type mentality of, I'm going to be fully intense or I'm not going to bring it at all.
Yeah. And I think so. You guys are completely agree. I am going to throw in nuance in and see what you guys think about it as well, which is just this idea of an internal or an external intensity. And I think a lot of the too much intensity, if you will, tends to be in that external sphere. Even if it's something like the showboater on the team that you don't like when you're watching football. You don't like his intensity because it's going towards your team. Maybe you can appreciate it, but there's a time and a place, and throwing your helmet isn't something that I want to see. Like, is there too much? Sure. Is there too little where you're not showing up at all? Yes. But is there a level of internal intensity that maybe isn't as, I'm yelling at the refs, but I am locked in here to support my niece or nephew. And like, would that tie into intentionality again and that idea of that present moment focus? Because I think that is still a good thing to have. And if we're running with the initial definitions that we got on intensity at the start, I think that's still fine. And so I think you can still bring it, but how you bring it might change. And I think there's also a couple different directions. You can go whichever one you want, but I've compared and contrasted what little I have with Goggins, but also with Kobe. And there's one small difference between the two for me. And that is that Kobe enjoyed, I think, just about everything that I've heard him say. Like, he wanted to be in the room. Goggins wanted to be in the room. They both wanted to be there. They're both bringing intensity. For whatever reason, like Brock talked about, when you get that ultimate level of, these are the things that you're doing, they're going to get done, and you're racing these hard steps. Can you get to a level of enjoyment? And I almost think that when Kobe talks about go to the weight room at 5 a.m., he enjoyed putting up 1,000 shots a night. He enjoyed every part of the aspect. And you see it when he goes into these rooms and talks, right? Be it, but when he was going and giving these speeches, he wanted to be there and he's enjoying it. He's living it up. He likes having those conversations and he likes being present with the people. It just always seemed like he was having fun. Even when he was on the court, like in his most intense moments, he's barking and he's very locked in on the game. But he was always, in a way, seemed to be having fun, at least to me. So I think that's one that Goggins, I think, is a little bit more externally intense, and it's more about achieving what it is that you're setting out to do and being somebody who finishes what they set out to do. And it's less about that fun aspect. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but I do think it's interesting to compare the two.
No, I think that's good. I think Brock kind of hit on that a little bit earlier. It sounds like one is more ego driven versus outcome driven. When you look at the two, just from a 30,000 foot perspective, Nick, when you're talking about Kobe, like, he enjoyed being in those places, wanting to work hard. And you look at the history of how he got there, the background, where that drive comes from. Whereas you look at Goggins, it's a little bit different. Where the way he details it, some of it came from pain, some of it came from, this is the way that he was able to prove to others, and then ultimately himself down the road, that he is hard, he is this tough guy who can accomplish what he said he would. But I think, again, part of that, like Brock said, is that ego versus outcome mindset that you have going into it.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
For sure.
I also think it brings up an interesting element of, can you have fun with like this low intensity? Like, is that something that you guys have experience with? I know for me, like, I've never been so locked in on running. And granted, most of my time as an athlete was more of this ego-driven mindset where I'm focused on the coach, not letting the team down, trying not to lose rather than to do my best. But now, when I work out, when I run, I am just having a good time and laughing. It'd be the hardest workout in the world, and I've got a smile on my face. I'm kind of just like, in the back, like, oh, this is sick. You guys want to go up the hill again? And it's not if somebody looked over, they would not say that's intense. And, internally, maybe there's a little bit more, but I'm having a good time, but accomplishing whatever it is.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about, like, does that fit intensity for you? Does that not fit intensity for you? And is any examples that resonate
Ask
for
your
you?
question one more time, Nick. So I can dial in on what you're asking.
Yeah. And this idea of, are there any moments that stick out to you or experiences that you've had where you were having a lot of fun? Maybe somebody wouldn't have thought that you were super intense from the outside, but you were committed to whatever it is what you were doing. You were having fun with it. And does that then fit your definition of intensity, or does it fall in a different category?
I can think of a really good story with this, specifically what you mentioned with sort of that smile on your face, enjoying the moment. That's very much something that I felt like I prided myself in as an athlete, and even as a person now, was just like, I want to find a way to make this positive, try to engage other people in this via having a smile, talking. Let's try to, find a way to make this a fun and enjoyable experience, even though it might suck. Like it might be the worst practice ever, but we got to find, some sort of silver lining in this moment. And I can remember specifically a very strict coach that I had that was saying, like, hey, Brock, like, are you going to take this seriously? And I was like, Coach, like, I'm literally giving this everything I have, but like, I just have a smile on my face because I love it. Mm-hmm. Like, I love the game. Like, I enjoy practicing. Like, there's no reason why I can't be smiling while also, going all in. So for some people, intensity can't be fun. They look at it and you're like, you gotta, work so hard right now that you take all the fun out of your life. And, you can enjoy the fun later. You got to work hard now. You're in your prime now. So you shouldn't find enjoyment right now. You should work, really hard for years and years and years, and then enjoy yourself when you're 50 and a multimillionaire. Okay. That's one way to look at it. That's one form of intensity. But is that healthy? I don't know. That's just kind of dependent on the people's personalities that look at intensity. But I think that's a good example of how someone can take it to the absolute extreme.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. I would also definitely say that, Brock, you are somebody who, when you're in the room, as I was talking to you a little bit yesterday, but if Brock is in the room with me, I feel like the room is elevated. Like, the energy of the room is higher, and it feels like we're having more of a good time just by your presence. So I would echo that. I think that's something that I was going to say, think about, like, and I think you guys achieve it differently, but I think it is something that resonates. And I think that fits in with intensity for me. And so, as a person, you have it and you can't have it as a person.
Appreciate that, Nick.
I was grabbing a couple notes here as I try to organize my thoughts about the question, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, but it sounds like you're asking, can fun and intensity coexist? Right?
Yeah,
pretty
Maybe I've hit
much. I
similar
kind of
points, yeah.
kind of parallels that. So
Yeah.
when I
Yeah,
think about that, I said absolutely. And I guess for me in particular, my thought is that when intensity meets passion, that equals fun. That equals goals. That equals achievement. When you can pair those things together, I think literally the sky is the limit at that point. When you and Brock, you just talked about it. We hear all the time, these are your golden years. This is the time when you have the most energy. You don't have any responsibilities. You should be working as hard as you can right now to enjoy the fruits of your labor down the road. Well, yeah, but let's think about this. If we are trying to get from the US to the UK, we're not going to drive a car there. We're either going to fly or take a ship or take a boat at this point. So I say all that to say you have to be in the right vehicle to do those things. If you are working hard, if you are putting all this time in, if you are aiming to be, we'll say, just successful very loosely here, if you're not in the right vehicle, why does it even matter at that point? What are you working hard for? What is this vehicle? Where is this vehicle taking you? Let's ask that. If you are able to take that intensity and the passion, and we'll use passion synonymously with work, job, relationships, friendships, whatever the case is, if you're able to take those two things and pair them together, I think that's where you find the fun. I think that's where you see the outcome like, wow, I'm thoroughly enjoying doing this right now. This is going to be, I'm going to work hard to make this the best relationship possible. And the end result is hopefully, if that's reciprocated, this is fun. This is enjoyment. This is a place that I love being. I'm going to take this run, this practice. I'm at the batting cages tonight. I'm going to have a great session. This is my passion. This is fun. This is fun. And I'm going to take it even a step further. It's fun to win. And don't think of winning solely as winning is only for the sports realm. Winning can be applied to everything. Winning's definition does not say, or I guess a synonym for win is win, sport, athletics. No, winning comes in so many different areas of your life. So again, I think it's absolutely possible to have those two, Nick. That intensity and that passion, bringing those together and finding a place where those two can meet. Oh yeah, you got fun on the horizon for sure. Absolutely.
For sure. I want to tie in something real quick there about taking a step back to enjoy it. And it reminds me of a saying that me and my one friend Cam have is smell the roses. Sometimes you got to take a step back and smell the roses because, people listen without hearing, people breathe without, smelling, and people, listen without understanding. There's so many ways that we go through the motions. Even with intensity, we can be so intense through our actions that sometimes you lose track of, well, why am I doing this? Like, am I really enjoying it? And, am I taking a step back to look at the whole picture instead of just one piece of the puzzle? And smelling the roses is such a great metaphor for that experience, to be able to take a step back when we need to and, reflect and ask those, really open-ended questions with yourself of, am I enjoying what I'm doing? Why am I doing this? Like, where do I want to go with this? And all these very personalized, open-ended questions are going to allow, the intensity of the individual, that battle you fight in the mirror of like, what am I really trying to get out of this? The more task-oriented you can be through that process, I think you're going to have a lot better of a time and find a lot more enjoyment throughout the years.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't know why my head went here, but a couple of really good points from Brock that I have in my notes. As number one, it's you look at yourself in the mirror, right? Growth is defined by your own standards. And so you growing is you being better than yourself. Where you can go from that is if you want to compare to other people, cool. You can use other people as feedback. When you win something against other people, is that feedback for you, or is that better than somebody else? And you're looking more at this ego-driven involvement, and that's where we get into kind of the toxicity. Is it's a lot easier to take winning as feedback that you did well than to take losing as feedback that you did wrong. But you also mentioned, why are you doing what you're doing? Where did you want to get with it? If you're on a date and you're playing mini golf, is your objective for the date to win mini golf? Is it to have a good time? Is it to support the other person? Is it to have conversation between the holes? None of those are bad goals or intents, but what is it? And what do you want to get out of it? And just make sure that you're in line with that, and you can really take a moment to smell the roses, reflect, and think about what's going to get me there. This planning phase that we mentioned at the beginning, or this live feedback phase of where am I currently at? What have I done to get here? And is this something I can sustain and want to sustain? Am I going in the right direction? Do I need to make changes? I think that's huge. And I also wanted to jump over to Mike's points about intensity plus passion. Phenomenal. That equaling fun. I love that concept. I do want to throw it back to both of you guys and say, for either intensity or passion, how do you develop it in someone else? How is it developed for you, if that's an easier phrase?
First thing that comes to mind for me, when we mentioned passion, that's a great word. And Angela Duckworth wrote a phenomenal book called Grit. And I think grit is a really good connection with intensity. To be a gritty person is to be an intense person, to endure those challenges. And she defined grit as passion and perseverance. And I think that's also a pretty good definition for what intensity looks like. Passion and perseverance. And something that she goes on to discuss in the book is, which of those is harder to find? And you would think it's the perseverance, but she said it's actually the passion, because people can have intensity and persevere through these moments, but keeping the passion through that is actually harder. And that's I think, really good insight and really ties well into this conversation. So I want to see where y'all go with that.
I'll get a different wormhole to answer that question. So, Mike, if you have something, feel free to get it first.
I can't say I necessarily do. As I think about developing intensity at I'll just say at a very basic level for someone who is looking to, in my opinion, enhance their life. I think intensity enhances your life significantly because of what you're able to accomplish and at what level. I don't know if I have a specific example, but I think it starts with discipline, kind of like Brock alluded to, doing some of the hard things, some of the chores, things that don't necessarily, I'll say, fulfill you early in your day, early in your week, early in the year. If it's a goal, trying to knock that out early in the year to better serve yourself for your discipline. And I think that will then translate to intensity. Once in, you hear practice makes perfect. And there's also the practice until you get it right. I think that kind of parallels this. Well, practice doesn't necessarily make perfect. Good quality, nearly perfect practices make perfect. You can practice something very poorly, and that won't serve you well at all. And if you only practice until you get it perfect, well, if that perfection only happens one time, when it comes to the real situation, how applicable will that practice be? So practice until you can't get it wrong. So I think kind of all those tie together, in my opinion, to maybe develop intensity, or if that's something that you're looking to add to your life, to add to your repertoire here of, wow, I want to start somewhere by growing myself, by creating discipline, intensity in my life. We've said it many times. Start by doing some things that you maybe don't like. Do something that's out of the ordinary for you. Change up your routine a little bit. And once you're able to accomplish those small feats, turn the dial up a little more. Try something a little harder. And eventually, I think you'll see the intensity start to grow in your personal life.
That's it right there.
Yeah.
I'll let you go ahead, Nick.
I would echo what Mike said, with the idea of discipline being a great starting point and building these habits. And I think another topic that ties in really, really well with it, that we've mentioned a couple times, is being present and being mindful and being in this moment, because this is where I am. We go back to Caleb a couple times here, and one of the quotes that came up when he was on with us, but it's just a normal quote for him, is if your body is here and your head is somewhere else, then you're nowhere, and if you don't want to be in the room, then leave the room, right? And at a very base level, if you want to develop passion and things like that, you do need to start where you have passion and find out what is passionate about that. And then you can start to figure out what you can identify as. Ultimately, is when you get into that, Goggins is, as a person, he identifies as somebody who has these core values, and those values can apply to different rings. And now we started to get into the conversation of, for me, what I have used to kind of sum up intensity and passion is, I want somebody who wants to be in the room. Something we've talked about in the form of recruiting, in a job aspect, with an athletics aspect. If you're a coach, you have athletes, I want somebody who wants to be there. I can work with you regardless of your talent level. This ties back to the beginning of today, but I want somebody who wants to be there. I don't want somebody who's got all this ability but doesn't necessarily think that they need to work. I do think there's another aspect, which is, how do you get to the level where you want to be at every room? And is the only route the Goggins route, or can there be a route where you just have fun in every room? For me, I turn to motivation there. I think that the research within that, which is, full disclaimer, my favorite, is very relevant. And so there's an instrument called the General Causality Orientation Scale that gives you a bunch of different scenarios. And so you could you get promoted at work, you get a new job, you're dealing with conflict, you have to plan a group event, you're a parent and dealing with homework with your kids. There's a bunch of scenarios, and they give you 3 different options for each scenario, and you rate how likely you are to do that option. And so, if you get a new job, your options might be, a failure focused option. It might be something about how much am I going to get paid. It might be, a fear that nobody's going to like you. It might be something about, wow, I hope that I can really demonstrate my best ability. And how likely is that thought to pop in your head? And what that scale more or less does is gives us some insight into how you see the world. When we put you into that room, what is your focus? And what about that room makes you want to be there, or do you not want to be there? And I think that then you get into the conversation of, okay, well, how do we develop an individual who just wants to be in every room that they are in? Because there's a method to it as far as the research is concerned. And discipline, mindfulness, being in that present moment is a huge step to not only, intensity and passion, but creating somebody who enjoys whatever environment they are thrown in, even if it's
good.
All right, and I'd like to bounce off of that. I think that's great insight, and applying some of that being in the room kind of guy is such a great way to actually see what intensity looks like. And someone walks in the room and you can feel it almost like, wow, like that guy means business. And I don't know, all of us listening to this, and we can really relate to those people in our lives and people that we've seen throughout our years where, they walk in the room or you start, you get to talk to them and, they just possess even some of those intangible qualities that we might not even know how to measure. But the goal, I think, of this episode was to discuss what are the measurables of intensity. There are some of those intangibles, but what are some of those things within our direct control that can increase intensity that, we can do on a daily basis? And want to tie back one more time to the Mental ABCs of Pitching book, because that's where I was also very inspired by a good chapter that in there they had about intensity. And they said, evaluate and keep a record of your intensity. So they said your intensity being, i.e., your focus, energy, discipline, and consistency. Focus, energy, discipline, consistency. That's a pretty good breakdown right there. Focus, that present moment focus that Nick has mentioned, that is so valuable to intensity. The energy is just, what I ask myself is, how bad do you want it? That's what energy, that's what energy is. How bad do you want it? What's the it? It doesn't matter. You put anything in the it and I'll show you I want it. Doesn't matter what it is. The it being open-ended is what really shows you what your intensity is like. How bad do you want it? What is it? I don't know, but I'll still bring it. That's a really good way that I look at it. And then we have discipline, pretty straightforward. I think we've touched on that really well. And then the consistency. How can I try to manage to do this every day? How can I apply this for days, for weeks, for years? Your dreams become pretty, realistic and achievable if you can apply that for, days,
right.
months, years.
No, that's good. That's good. Go ahead, Nick.
I love that. And I think the two that I'm going to build on a little bit are energy and consistency. And I think it's one really wrong with energy, but it could be different by the person, right? The way that Brock phrases this isn't that you need to be this over the top, inauthentic version of yourself in every scenario that you are in, every room that you're in, every hit that you're chasing. It's your energy compared to you again. And so are you bringing energy by your standards? This doesn't mean, if you're an introvert, you switch to extrovert. And so I haven't read the book. I'm guessing that's hopefully in line with it, or maybe I'm way off. But the other one was consistency. And you mentioned the sustainability there. That again, for me, when we talk about how do we get there, it comes back to different sources. How are you getting people to do things, especially if you're in a role where you're trying to create intensity in others, but even in yourself? And so if you are motivating people with sources that are not sustainable, if I'm giving Brock money to play baseball, maybe he's a professional athlete or something, how long, if that money is the driver, is that going to work for him? And is he going to like baseball after he's done with it? I think there's a fascinating conversation to be had around, and this is probably the other day, but Brock and I being at the D3 level, Mike being at the D1 level, scholarships are a really interesting thing when we talk about motivation. And they're super interesting when you talk about people who weren't high performing and in that meeting all the time mode. What do they think of that sport, those activities, that process, and those habits that they were building after college? In my experience, the people who didn't get a monetary reward or stipend or things like that kind of develop an appreciation that I think you see a lot of scholarship athletes develop after, but it's not immediate. When I take that scholarship away, there's a taste in your mouth. Well, why would I do that? I'm not getting anything for it. and that is like a key piece of why you're continuing to do the sport. And then a lot do find an enjoyment for it. And it's that turnaround story where they shift the motivation of why they are doing what they're doing that creates the consistency and the sustainability in the actions and the habits and overall the enjoyment of the sport as well. That passion, that intensity come right back. And so we've mentioned identity a few times. If you value something and you view yourself as a certain type of person and what you're doing, you can align with those values and who you are. That's a really strong motivator that tends to be very sustainable. Goggins can continue to do this because that's who he is. Keep pulling. Whereas if I'm, doing it for a reward or for a punishment, that's not the most sustainable thing. Will it work? Yes, 100%. It will get people to do things. Will it work over time? It depends what other sources are in play. There's going to be multiple at any times. You're going to get paid and that's going to be motivator for work. But is that the only one? And so I think that's a big one. And you get into the pure intrinsic motivation being that fun, that passion, that enjoyment, right? You don't have to tell a kid to go play. They are going to go play and they will enjoy it and they will not get tired of play. Ideally, we could live our whole life like that. Realistically, I don't know. It seems like we all kind of fall short of that. But are there people in your life who just enjoy every second of life? I would also argue there's probably a couple there. So how do we get there? That's kind of where my head goes when we talk about creating intensity and passion. What if we could all be that one or two outliers? So just happy to be everywhere.
No, I think that's a great way to kind of sum all of it up. Especially when we take a look at the different, we'll say, levels of intensity, the different perspectives on intensity, when it is most applicable, when it's okay to be a bit more intense in one arena versus another, where it's applied. I think that's a great way to look at it, Nick. And then we bring fun into the equation. How do you make intensity fun? What is it that you can do, or really a kid can do in their lives to continue developing intensity, but also keeping the fun in there as well? Like, is there passion behind it? What is the driving force from that? So I think all those points you just hit on really sum up everything that we've been talking about in just kind of a one kind of lump sum group here. I do want to ask, though, as we look towards this new week that we're about to enter, what is something that we can do as individuals? And this is kind of a multifaceted question here: to be present in the room, to be intense in maybe one or two areas, but to also combine intensity with a passion, or make the intensity fun. So we got present in the room, intense, and making intensity fun.
Okay. One thing that pops into my mind that I have written this down in my notes before the session from doing some research with Dr. Patrick Cohn. He's works in private practice in mental performance coaching. And he said that finding more enjoyment and intensity comes from making a game within the game. And I think that's a really good way to touch upon a couple of those, but specifically the enjoyment aspect, because a lot of athletes get bored when they're not setting regular challenges for themselves. So elite performing athletes are so good. You become so good at specific life skills that you might just become bored with them over time. Let's try to make a game within the game. Being a little bit more present in, okay, I'm playing 18 holes of golf today. Well, how can I make a game within that? The 18 holes of golf takes 4.5 hours. I could get bored throughout that amount of time. Let's try to make 2 birdies in the first 5 holes. Let's make that small game within the game to create a more present-driven intensity that I can apply for the next 20 minutes. Well, how do we apply that to life? Well, I have a week. I'm writing out all the tasks that I need to do this week. It's a little overwhelming. What can I do in the next, Monday comes around. What can I do in the next 4 hours today? How many boxes can I check? What can I do right now that's going to help me on, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, that I, took the time to check that box when I needed to and make that game within the game. That's really valuable insight.
I like that. I like that a lot. Nick, how you feeling about this question?
I love it. I think I'm going to build off Brock's a little bit here with this idea of setting limits or chunking. And back to the idea of you don't want it to be too easy. You don't want it to be hard. You don't want what you're doing to be too long or too short in terms of where your focus is. Right. And also with your mindset. And so for me, setting limits within your mindset is massive. You can phrase that however you want. But this concept of if you want to be a more passionate, a more positive person, what's stopping you from getting? And to me, a lot of the times, there's really not that much physically stopping you from being there. And one way that I can tackle that and overcome it is starting a list proactively rather than reactively with gratitude. And so I don't usually put a number with it because then it starts to feel more like a chore to me. But if I put a sticky note on my desk and I'm like, hey, I'm going to write down some good things that happened to me today, suddenly I'm looking for the good things in the day and I'm tricking my mind into that game. Like Brock said, I'm tricking myself into finding all these cool things. And I end up at the end of the day. Usually I do 3 at the end of the day. I start the list in the morning. I've got 10 things. I'm like, dang, I don't even know which one to share. These are all so awesome. And this is something that we talked about a friend of all of ours with Seth. But man, once you get that positivity to be contagious, it starts to become fun with those little things. Everything's good. That's enjoyable. And so I think that's a really easy way. Is a sticky note somewhere near me that sets my mind up for what I want to be. I want to be more intense. Things that I was intense in for the day, or whatever prompt is going to resonate with you, and holding yourself to it.
That's really good. That's really good. I like the sticky note concept. Like you said, we've talked about that before. Be finding those points in the day where you're grateful about something, bringing the positivity. I think that positivity breeds positivity. If you find the things that are making you happy and bringing a light to your life, the more that you acknowledge them, the more that they come to you, and the easier that you can see them. So I think that's really good, Nick. For me personally, this week, seeing how this will be my first week of really not having a true obligation to work. Like this is going to be a weird limbo week for me. I'm excited for it, but I think that for me being present will be reflecting on the journey, because I feel like I've been going hard for so long. So Brock, kind of like you said, stopping to smell the roses just for a second before I turn the intensity back up with my schedule, with my branding, making sure that I am aligning my day and what I need to get done with the goals that I want to achieve. And so for me, I think my intensity will come from the planning piece of it. It's something that I've fallen short in other areas of my life. I just kind of sometimes will do things just kind of at a very quick pace on the fly, not giving a ton of thought to it and figuring it out as I go. But I think this is one of those times where I need to slow down a bit, be more intentional about the planning that I'm doing, and turn the intensity up on it. So if I can add the intensity to the intentionality, I think that will help me carry myself a long way. And then to make it fun, I don't think I need help with that one. I think I'm already doing that. I've left something that wasn't as fun for me, that kind of bored me and didn't bring me any joy, honestly. But now I get the opportunity to work with some youth, work with people who are looking to make some health changes in their life. So the fun piece is there. I just need to find the intensity, the intentionality piece, and dial those things up together simultaneously to create that present moment that I want to be able to have.
I like that a lot. I'm going to throw one more in and then we'll wrap up here. But thought of it when you were talking about having conversations with other people. This one is specific to if somebody else is in the room. But to be more present, jumping into conversations without an end goal in the conversation, I think genuinely exploring what someone has to say. And even if it's a discussion, going in with that idea that you don't need to win the discussion. You don't need to win an argument. You can just take perspective, learn from it, disagree with it, but just to be there in the moment, having the conversation and picking someone's brain or having a conversation with them. For the sake of having the conversation, not to get anywhere, not to get a specific outcome to you, not because you wanted to, kind of fulfill some plan. Like they're not a pawn on your chessboard. That's a person. And so treating them as a person, just taking that with no, intent.
Yeah, I think my final wrap up point, and we've done a great job at connecting all the dots, and Michael's done a great job at piecing these together with the enjoyment tied into the intensity, but is just the fulfillment. And, everyone listening, just, we want to live fulfilling lives in one way or another. And what that fulfillment looks like is very individualistic based on, your experiences and, the resources you have present in your life. And, it's not to discount anybody's, current situation. And, there's different limiting factors in everybody's stories in certain times, but to, play the game of life and to play it in a fulfilling way, in one way or another is going to have to come with being intense about your actions, being intense about, your effort, being intense about your present moment focus. And I just think the more we can do that, the more fulfilling and a just full lifestyle we can accomplish while we're all walking through this game of life together, and just to be able to apply that intensity across so many different domains is going to be a great breakthrough for a lot of people.
Yeah, completely agree. A concept that I think this is a new one for Brock. Mike, we've talked about this once or twice, but my self-talk during races was I am here, so I am happy. And that is, in a nutshell, some intensity for me, but it's just this concept of I am right here, right now. And I am grateful for it. And therefore, I want to be here. There's no place I would rather be than where I am because there's nowhere else I can.
Right. Yeah.
All right. I think that's another big one in the books. Brock, we thank you again for joining us. I also just noticed that we all got the memo that was not pushed out that we are wearing black shirts today for crew decks. So that was good coordination that just kind of happened. Love that.
Bluetooth today, y'all. Bluetooth is here.
All right. And then if you made it this far and you aren't subscribing or liking or, keeping whatever you do to keep up with the people you like to listen to, we're not going to tell you to, because that would be mean, but we'll encourage you.
Nick's being nice. I'm going to tell y'all, hey, like, comment, share, please. If there was something you found interesting, we appreciate y'all making it this far. Do us a favor and get it out there. Again, our goal is to reach as many mods as possible, to share some insightful thoughts, and to help challenge ourselves and those listening. So we appreciate y'all being on this journey with us. Brock, we appreciate you tapping in with us for this episode. This episode 16 of Mend the Mind. Thank y'all. We are out of here.